The Joe Rogan Experience.
Has anybody come up with any sort of comprehensive plan or anything that makes sense where they can viably repopulate the ocean? I mean, the idea of stopping and slowing down fishing would be wonderful, but if it really gets to a point where we've got to somehow or another independently grow these fish and reintroduce them to the wild, I mean, is there any talk of doing things like that, or is it even impossible?
I think it's impossible, the scale of what's going on right now. When I was in Japan, they were saying that, we used to go out we could fill up a boat in a day. Now it's 8 days. Now we have to go out 30, and we're competing with the Koreans, the Chinese, the Taiwanese. It's
and everybody's just going gangbusters.
And we're using military gear to sonar to catch things at this unprecedented rate. It's not sustainable. I personally don't believe that feeding this planet currently, you can do it with fish. I don't think you can do it with and we know that the unethical side of raising farm animals for this it's just, I think we have to transition to another form. I think it's going to be 10 or 12 years, but I think we're headed that direction. I think what you're seeing now is that there's a direction towards people want to eat healthier, they want to eat sustainable. And I know you're a hunter. I mean, I was a hunter too. I hunted fish, and I understand, like, when you come back with the goods, you come back with an animal, and you're feeding your family, you're feeding your friends, you feel like the man. You feel like there's something you tap in that's really primitive in a really genuine way that makes us feel good about who we are, that you're providing. And I know that happened when I was a fisherman. You go hunt a fish with your friends, and there's a group thing going on, and everybody's there, they're enjoying themselves, and it feels wonderful. But we can't do it with wild fish. And, with 4% of the biomass being wild animals now, and the rest of it being, it's not sustainable. And I wish it was, because there's something we lost with that. But we have to transition. We're at that period right now where we have to figure out, how do you feed a planet?
That's the real problem, right? And not just how do you feed a planet. How do you feed a planet that may double its population in the next 50 years?
Yeah, well, they're talking 10 billion by 2050, and we're already at a point where, we're at the...
so 20 years past that, it might really be double. It might be 15 million, billion people. That's crazy.
So, you can't have 18.5 million people in the greater Los Angeles area going out and hunting for their food or fishing for, So what are we going to eat? And I think the way to do it is, drifting more towards plants, last week I was in Loma Linda, California. You know where that's at? You've heard about one of the blue zones?
Yeah.
And, so it's for the people out there that might not know about it, Dan Buettner, geographic fellow, popularized the idea that there's these 5 geographic regions of the planet where people live longer and without chronic disease than any other place on the planet. So I was out there last week at the Brain Health and Alzheimer Clinic. And there's 2 researchers that started one. There wasn't one for miles around. And they opened it. 1 out of 3 people in America in the next 10 years are going to be affected by Alzheimer's. Either they're going to have it, their mate's going to have it, they're going to be taking care of somebody that has it, their parents. So it's going to overtake heart disease as our number 1 disease that we have. They opened up the Brain Health Clinic there, with an Alzheimer clinic, and nobody came. Now, about half the population is Seventh-day Adventists. They're vegetarians by religion. And you go to the grocery store, they don't sell meat. They have milk, they have cow's milk, but it's on the bottom shelf. They just have a few things of it. And they to find people initially, they had to go to San Bernardino across the highway. There's nothing different, geologically different between San Bernardino and Loma Linda. They're drinking the same water, breathing the same air, but they have a different diet. But they're living about 10 years longer than everybody. San Bernardino is one of the unhealthiest populations in America, and on the other side of Highway 10, you have one of the healthiest populations in the entire world, and they're living about 10 years on average longer. They're doing other things too. It's not just diet.
It's a big factor, sleep. I mean, Dr. Matthew Walker has been on this podcast, who's a well-renowned sleep scientist. was discussing that it's one of the biggest corollary, one of the biggest factors where they've determined that the less sleep you have, the higher likelihood you have of Alzheimer's disease, and it's really stark. Like the numbers are, they're pretty undisputable.
Yeah, well, I agree. They have 4 principles. The Shirzais, Dean and Aisha Shirzai. Sleep is one of them.
Yeah.
Whole foods, plant-based diet, support. The community support and exercise. Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
But out of the 3,000 people that they have in the Alzheimer's clinic now, only 13 of them are vegetarians and 3 vegans. So I mean, you look at, if you break it down, the population, like how many of the 24,000 people there that are vegetarians, about 15%. You'd expect, several hundred of them to be, with Alzheimer's to be vegetarians, but they're not there.
So many of them are following that Seventh-day Adventist diet, which is vegetarian.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, San Bernardino is a very poor community, unfortunately, and I think as well as I do, a lot of people in poor communities eat terrible.
It's true.
And you're eating junk food and sugar and all that crap. I mean, that's one of the primary factors when it comes to poor health and
education is related definitely to brain health, unfortunately, and it has nothing to do that they're stupid. It's just that you're right. They're not eating. They're not eating as well. They have to. The first McDonald's was in San Bernardino.
Was it really?
Yeah. We went to the museum there, the McDonald's museum.
They have a McDonald's museum.
Yeah.
Do they have all the Ronald McDonald's from the beginning to the end?
Everything. Yeah. So they've been really good about keeping fast food out of Loma Linda for.
But isn't there giant concerns even with large-scale agriculture? When you're talking about monocrops and growing things for 15 billion people, you're going to need gigantic swaths of land. It's going to displace a lot of wildlife. You're going to have a lot of different chemicals that get released into the ground unless you're doing regenerative farming, in which case you're going to have to use some animal products anyway because you have compost and fertilizer. You need fish for fertilizer or something that creates nitrogen. There's a lot of issues even with large-scale agriculture when you're growing crops. You're doing something that's wholly unnatural. If you have 1,000 acres of corn or soybeans or anything that you're growing in large scale, that's not how nature intends it. Nature intends everything to be combined together.
Right, but if you look at the amount of crops that are out there, most land is being used to grow crops to feed animals. So
Well, sort of. A lot of it's being used to feed animals. A lot of it's being used for corn syrup and a lot of different.
And we can agree on that. Get rid of it. Yeah, I mean,
you've seen King Corn, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking crazy when they check your DNA and they find out how much of your DNA is corn based, and you're like, what? Like, what is going on? Or how much of your cellular structure is corn based? It's like, how much corn is in your diet? And then you go through the supermarket and go and pick up box after box and read how much corn is in there. Corn starch, corn syrup, different proteins that they've extracted from corn.
Well, let me ask you, how do you think if we have to feed 10, 15 billion people in the future, how do you think?
Real question.
We should be feeding the population?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. I have hope for this fake meat shit. Not the plant-based stuff where they're using oils but the actual physical meat, that they can figure out some way to create meat without animals die. Like I am not a fan of factory farming. It's the reason why I got into hunting in the first place. I saw a lot of those PETA documentaries, and I just didn't want to have any part of any of that shit. And I know there are ethical ranchers that raise their animals grass-fed and they let them roam. And there's a guy named Joel Salatin who has this thing called Polyface Farms, where he teaches people regenerative farming methods and teaches people how to let animals be animals, and is the polar opposite of factory farming. When you see these, and I'm sure you've seen some of these disgusting videos of these pig farms where they have lakes of sewage attached to these farms, where these pigs are in these warehouses stacked in one on top of the other, and then all their waste goes down through the floor and into these giant, huge lakes of shit and piss.
And then they spray it on the crops.
Well, I don't know if they spray that on the crops, but it leaks into the ground.
Yeah.
They spray the pig and shit on the
crop. Oh yeah.
Well, Look, all that stuff is wrong. I mean, all of it's wrong. I mean, whether chickens, raising chickens like that, or cows like that, or pigs like that. And there's a reason why they have these ag-gag laws. And those are another thing that are akin, in my eyes, to the same thing that the way we feel about dolphins in captivity in a place like SeaWorld. Those ag-gag laws, agricultural gag laws, they keep people from divulging the horrors of these factory farms. And there's got to be a way to stop those laws. First of all, these places should be transparent. If there's something they do that's abhorrent, there's something they do where you could see the lives of these animals and they're treated in these horrific ways. It's not necessary. It's just they're doing that for profit, and this is why you can get a chicken sandwich for $1.99 or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, I mean, if that saying, if slaughterhouses had glass walls.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, going back to it though. I mean, so how do you? So lab meat, you think would be the?
I think lab meat has real potential. The same way cell phones used to cost, $1,000. Well, what more than that? Like what was like one of those big Motorola bricks? Remember those things that Gordon Gekko had on Wall Street? They were really expensive. Like when he was walking down the beach with that thing, like, wow, that guy's a baller. He's got a phone. He's just walking with no cord. Now everyone has a phone. I mean, I was in Brazil, and these people were walking around. They had very little money, but they all had phones. The cell phones have made their way throughout virtually all of the world. How much?
$4,000.
$4,000. So $4,000 in '82 is probably what today? 20? Probably like 20, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's a lot.
Let's just say it's a lot.
Definitely a lot.
Even if it's $4,000. Imagine if a fucking iPhone was $4,000, people would be going crazy. Well, the new one's almost $2,000, and everybody's going crazy.
Yeah, so that just.
I think that sort of technological innovation and improvement. I think we were going to see that in this sort of factory-created meat, because the original factory-created burger that they made, I believe it was $250,000. That it cost to create one, and people ate it, and they're like, this is beef. This is like real beef. I think with innovation, they could figure out a way to do that so we don't ever have to have these factory farming situations. I mean, I think that's possible.
Yeah, no, I think it is too. When I've talked to some of the people that are working on that, and when you look at how fast cells can reproduce, it's just a matter of scale and getting the right texture and taste.
Yes. Look, I'm under no illusion that what I do is available to everybody. I go hunting in the mountains. Most people don't want to do that, and I do it with a bow and arrow. No, most people don't want to learn how to do that. They don't have it in them. They don't want it. It's not interesting. To me, it is, if I shoot one elk, that is 400 pounds of meat. One life feeds me for a year. And I feed my friends. I feed a lot of people. I give elk meat out to a bunch of people. I'm under no illusion that everyone can do that. But everyone can't do most of the things that I do. I just do it because it makes me feel better than going and getting something that's factory farmed. If I saw what they did to chickens and I knew that my chicken had come from these horrific environments and I ate that, I'd feel sick.
Yeah.
And so that's why I became a hunter in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's what we concern ourselves is like how can you and I can eat. You probably better than me, but I can eat how I want to eat.
But doesn't that sound weird? You say I eat better than you?
No, well, you can afford more, is what I'm saying. You're
wealthier.
What it is?
No, but I'm telling you, I'm getting my meat from the woods.
Well, I'm not saying better. I'm saying that you could eat how you want.
Oh, I see.
You easier than me. I'm just saying I'm not
financially.
I've seen what you have around here. There's nice little cozy man den you have down here. But boys, you should see what's out there. It's like the ultimate.
It's a man
caveman.
Yeah, not caveman, but man cave. Ultimate caveman would be a giant Neanderthal. But yeah. Look, the conversation between. I mean, I have a gang of friends that are vegan and vegetarian. One of my best friends is vegan, Ian Edwards. I love him to death. I don't dispute that we're in a conundrum and we're in a terrible situation as a civilization. We've certainly overpopulated the planet in many ways. And we've certainly allowed something to take root in our society that I think is disgusting. And that's factory farming of animals. There's something vile about it, undeniably vile. And there's a reason why people are prosecuted for exposing what makes everybody sick. Like if they exposed it and said, look, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to show you a video of how these cows are living. And you take the video and the cows just wandering around eating grass. No one would give a shit.
Right.
Right? It's when you see these people kicking these cows and when you see them alive, when like kosher, the way they do that, where they have to slice their throat and they have to do it with one cut, and this is why people want kosher meat, like some ancient, ridiculous idea of how to dispose of a life. Whew. I mean, all those things sicken people, which is the reason why they have those laws keeping people who work there from videotaping and exposing it in the first place.
Yeah.